So yeah, I'll give you guys a little bit of background on this series and what we're kind of trying to do here. It's still early, but this is the second meeting we have. So the idea is kind of how can we actually bring about change in relation to sustainability, the environment, but all the other social issues too that I think are related, at least in my view, to sustainability. Like it's obviously not sustainable to have cops that are killing people. That's not a sustainable thing. It's not a sustainable thing to have the amount of consumption that we do have in our society. So we're just trying to get here and engage with these different concepts. And really the main goal is kind of to work towards positive and concrete solutions and actions, whether that's whatever that is may be. We're still trying to kind of figure that out. And that's actually leads me into one of our guests that's here now, like Sue, who's the mayor of my borough, and we kind of left the last roundtable talking about reaching out to different politicians that represent you and telling them that you think there needs to be more done, and that's kind of part of what this group's for. Um, so yeah, Sue's here because of that, reaching out. And so yeah, I did kind of the exercise of reaching out to my mayor, so in my borough, and then as you go up, you have provincial representatives in Canada as well, and then you have someone who represents you federally as well. So those are the other kind of different levels that I reached out to based on where I live, because those people are really supposed to represent me and population that lives around me. But whatever the district is, it's different depending on the level. So some of the things I guess I wanted to talk about these ideas, since we do have someone here that can maybe give their input to. And we also have Malcolm is also kind of has been involved in like the political field and non-for-profit as well. But so it'll be kind of nice to have these different viewpoints, but also people that have worked in the political sphere at least. So yeah, I guess maybe asking or opening up the question of like how can we get, building on this idea of how can we get change to happen. So how can we, one level of this is going to our politicians. So how can we get the politicians to hear us? How can we engage with them? How can we make the politics of our area more transparent and engaging with people? So maybe open that question up just to everyone. How can we think about that? Like how the political system interfaces with the different social change that we want to see.
Mhm. Well, if you want, I can give you a little bit of input from my end, if you want, or do you want other people? Do you want the politician to shut up?
No, it'll be interesting to hear
Okay.
your
Okay. Well,
perspective.
I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and how I got into politics. So, I was a journalist for 30 years, and I traveled all of like Haiti, all over Africa. I was in Europe and here in Montreal. And, I did a lot of social justice journalism and sort of investigative journalism, but mainly being a voice, that voice for the voiceless. I really took that to heart, and I'm proud to say that I brought about some change through my work. One of the big stories I broke was the sexual abuse at Collège Notre Dame by the brothers, and that ended up, the victims ended up getting $18 million settlement, which was the largest of any religious, what do you call them, religious group in Canada, having to pay out $18 million. I think they should have paid out more because they own a ton of land, including the oratory and so on, but that's another discussion. Yeah, so then as you know, journalism has changed quite a bit, and there's not a lot of resources left to do that kind of journalism. So after 30 years in the business, I decided to leave. It was 2014. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. I just decided it was time for a change. So, and this is how I know what Malcolm is, that I ran for the nomination for the NDP in 2015, but I didn't win the nomination, but it was a really good experience. And then in 2017, Valerie Plante approached me to run as mayor for Projet Montreal. And my response to her was, do you know me? Because I'm not a politician. I'm very outspoken. I speak my mind. I'm very frank. And, I'm no bullshit, basically. And she said, oh, no, that's why we want you. And I said, okay, fine. As long as you don't try to muzzle me, then I will run. So I ran, not thinking I would win, because I was up against Russell Copeman, who's the incumbent. It's hard to beat the incumbent. But lo and behold, I won. So I was really catapulted into this job that, I didn't have any experience in, but I had lived in NDG for 22 years. I'd raised my kids here. I saw all kinds of potential, but like a lot of residents, I didn't see a lot of change happening. So, I guess I came in naively thinking I could change a lot of things quickly and overnight. And I quickly learned like that's not the case. It's a huge bureaucracy. There's a lot of things wrong with it. And coming from the journalism sphere where I had daily deadlines, I found it very frustrating because things just don't move. So, and one of the big issues we had recently that really frustrated me was the Terrebonne bike path, which caused all kinds of uproar among people, which I found very disappointing because there's a lot of entitlement out there, and our whole society is built around cars and people's so-called right to park their private property on public property, which is a real thorn in my side. So I raised 2 kids without a car. I haven't owned a car since 1989, long before you guys were even born. So it can happen. You can do it, and I would recommend it because it's a lot cheaper. My blood pressure is probably much lower. I'm probably in better shape because I bike and I walk and I take metro everywhere. So my goal as mayor, next year is the election year, is to really so I'm no longer in Projet Montreal. I don't know if anybody's followed that whole drama, but I'm no longer with them, and I'm an independent. And I really think we need politicians who have the courage and audacity to say, this is what we're going to do. Like you see it in the mayor in Paris. They've added hundreds of kilometers of bike paths. Of course, we've been able to take advantage of COVID because so many people are biking now. So it's we've been lucky to be able to speed things along in many, many cities. But in our borough, there seems to be a real pushback, unfortunately. And I'm disappointed in Projet Montreal because they backed down on the bike path as well. I was the only one at the end of the day to actually vote to keep it. So, it takes courage for politicians to do this, but I'm 60 years old. I don't need this job. There's a million other things I could do that might be even more enjoyable than this. But I really do believe that we need to make change, and we need to make it, drastic change, and we need to make it now. And that's really why I want to get people like your age on board, because I really think that things are changing. If you're anything like my kids, you don't want to own a car. You don't need to own a car. You appreciate that we need to act to save our planet, unlike people of my generation who can't imagine living without a car. So basically that's where I am now. I am very much you know, I think this mandate is a bit of a lost cause because I'm the only one out of 6 members of council who think like this. But next year I'm hoping to run a slate of candidates in Côte-de-Neige and DG that will stand with me and say, we've got to change and we have to change things now. Like things like, so I talked about bike paths. I think we can do a lot more with bike paths. I think we can do a lot more with green space, a lot more with composting. Recycling is a joke in the city. So there's a lot of things we can do, but I think what we have to do is set goals. And I think we could make it sort of a competition among boroughs. Which borough is going to cut back, the number of cars that are in the borough, or who's going to increase the kilometers of bike paths, and how do we get people to buy into that? I think people just can't picture it, so they don't want to do it. So anyway, I don't want to talk too much, but basically I just wanted to let you know where I stand on these things, and that I take it very, very seriously. I marched last fall, like everybody else. It was a year ago, I think, with Greta and 500,000 Montrealers. But I just feel like nothing really happened after that, and we need to do more than just march.
Yeah, there are a few things you mentioned that I maybe want to touch on, but if anyone wants to just add to that or has any ideas to what Sue just said, but
Well, maybe I could add something. One of the things we talked about in the previous incarnations of this event was the kind of focus on individual responsibility versus really, what's it going to matter if all of us, bike everywhere? Really what we need is some kind of big institutional change. And I guess my question is more like, you're the mayor, but it seems like even if you really wanted to do some big change, there's things that are still blocking you. So like, what are the kind of things that are stopping big changes from happening? Like, making a whole street have no cars on it, for example. Like, it just seems like, it can't happen. Okay.
Well, I think what's happening now in Montreal is drivers are being pitted against. It's like you're either one or the other. You're either a cyclist or a driver, but that's obviously not true. I mean, when I go out of town, I rent a car and, I drive. Our family sometimes needs a car. But I'm trying to say to people, like, not everyone needs to own a car. Yes, there are some people who need a car, like, say, for their work, because they travel all over the island. Or there's some people who have mobility problems who need a car. But even if we were to get rid of a third of all those cars, it would make a huge difference, because everybody complains about being stuck in traffic, but they are the traffic. Like, they are the only thing causing traffic are the cars. They love to complain about the construction here and so on, but even if you didn't have any construction, you would still have traffic jams, because there's just the simple reality is there are too many cars. So I think what we need to do is to offer viable, safe alternatives. And a lot of cyclists have said they don't cycle because they're afraid. It's too dangerous. And you have to sell that as a win-win for everyone, like a win-win for the drivers as well, because if you have people cycling or walking, then you don't have them in a car. So therefore there's less traffic. But it's difficult. You're right. It's difficult getting people on board, because I think there's been studies done that actually show parking affects some part of the brain directly. Like, people lose their shit if they don't have a parking spot. And, if we can get more car share programs, or more, just make it more difficult to own a car, or more expensive to own a car. Like, it's ridiculous that you can park on the street for free in Montreal. What other city can you park for free? I don't think it exists. So there's little things like that. And I do think that if we can educate people to show them the advantages, then it can be a win. But I also think there's a real appetite among young families in our borough to have their kids walk to school, to have their kids bike to school, but they're afraid to let them because it's dangerous, because of the too many cars.
Well, yeah, I mean, even myself, having grown up here and lived here for now like 25, 26 years, I grew up and I walked to school every day in the mornings, elementary school. And, maybe that's part of what you talked about too, of like people who don't do that, they probably don't have the same ideas about like, okay, we don't really need a car. Like, because if they're driving to school every day, they think they need a car. But I wanted to bring up or like ask you about you mentioned kind of, I think we're all kind of in agreement generally of like, we need more stuff to happen. We're for, sustainable practices for the environment, doing things, whether it's getting more cars off the road or whatever. And you mentioned having that mindset too, and coming from like journalism, that you had all these different barriers even once you were in the position of power. So like, what sorts of things did you encounter, and how do you think we can build a system that doesn't have, I mean, in theory they're made to like protect us so that we don't, people don't just make crazy decisions without oversight, but like how can we, get things to happen more quickly, or things that we want to happen as like citizens and even as elected representatives? Like, I don't know.
Well, I think the one thing about municipal politics is that I always thought it'd be kind of boring because it's all about garbage and recycling. But as a matter of fact, it's probably the most interesting because this is the level you're closest to people. Like if I were an MP, I probably wouldn't have time to be on a Facebook thing, but this is the part of the job that I like, is being really close to people and hearing their ideas, because I don't have all the solutions, obviously. And there's a ton of expertise in our community. We have a lot of universities and hospitals and, highly educated people who have some great ideas. So I think one of the ways is to, first of all, elect people that are they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do and stand by it, like put in a bike path and then stand up to the opposition and defend what they voted for. And that's not easy to do because you get a lot of abuse as a politician, but you have to have convictions. And yeah, there'll be opposition, but you're not going to please everybody. You just have to believe in what you're doing. And I think you as citizens, like what you're doing now, is really good to get involved. Like Toby, you wrote to me, and anybody who writes to me, I will write back to them. I will offer to meet with them. I want to hear their ideas. I think it sounds kind of cliche, but I would like it to be a grassroots thing, like from the bottom up. I want, people are so cynical about politics now, myself included, that I think we need to, and again, that sounds hokey, but empower people to show them that you can make a difference. Like if you come to council and you ask questions, or you write to your councillor or to your mayor, you will be heard. And it does take time. I find things just take too long, but that's the bureaucracy. But as a mayor, I do have quite a bit of power, that if I really want to push something ahead, I can. So so my advice to you is, I know you always feel like, well, I don't really matter. I'm just like one of hundreds of people. But I don't think that's true. I think you have more power than you think you do. And one of the biggest influences you have is your vote, and then holding your councillor or your mayor accountable for what they said they would do. and really pushing them. Like, I know there's a lot of bike activists that come to our council. Well, when we had council in person, but now they send their questions virtually. You know, they're there every month. They show up every month, and they're just like, you know, pushing the envelope, pushing their agenda. And it's true, the squeaky wheel gets the grease.
If anyone else wants to jump in at any point, feel free. But
yeah, I guess if I can. So, I mean, Toby, you know, he has a master's degree in urban planning, and I just started my master's degree in urban planning too. And I brought up the
Where?
Dalhousie.
Oh, okay, so you're down east, obviously.
No, I'm still in Montreal actually, but
you're doing it online
right now. Yeah. I mean, I could have got into the bubble over there, but you know, it's a lot cheaper staying here.
For sure.
But yeah, you know, in the classes, I kind of brought up the whole Terrebonne bike path debacle, you know, and this idea of like NIMBYism, and you know, if you were to talk to these people, they'd support more bike paths in general, but once it affects them and they're losing their parking, they're no, we can't have it. And
but the irony with Terrebonne is there is parking. Like, they have driveways, they have laneways. But what I learned through one council meeting is that people they also don't want strangers they don't want strangers in front of their house.
Okay.
Which I don't get.
So bizarre. Yeah. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, this one guy came to council once and he asked for parking on his street, like sticker parking. And I said, well, you have driveways. And he said, but there's all these strangers parking in front of my house during the day. And I said, yeah, it's public property. But yeah, I just find, you're right. It's the NIMBYism, it's the entitlement. Mm-hmm. But I'm convinced with Terrebonne that it was a small vocal, a minority, very vocal. Mm-hmm. And they made a lot of noise. And then finally the bike lobby woke up and thought, oh, we're going to lose this. And then they became vocal. But by then it was too late.
Right. Yeah, because it's a sad story in a way, because I know they're kind of framing it right as there wasn't public consultation, right?
Which means you didn't ask us so we could say no.
Yeah.
But there's been years of studies and talk and so on, and so we just took the moment of COVID to install it. You know, and just temporarily, like not like just to the winter even.
Right.
And they just went ballistic.
No, counselors had to right away. There was too much citizen revolt in a way.
Yeah, but I'm convinced that if they just held the line, it would have died down.
Right.
It always does. You know, at first people are freaked out, but then it dies down.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
it's one street. It's one street in the whole city.
It's like what? Not even 3 kilometers.
Yeah,
something like that.
1.6 kilometers.
Yeah, but it's strange because that whole idea, you know, like I brought it up talking to one of my professors, and he's a big cycling guy in Halifax, and you know, he's a professional planner and all that, but it's the idea that, you know, the way streets are, there's only so much space, so you either have to, you know, work together and be able to share the road properly, or you really have to separate things. You have to say, this is a dedicated bike lane, this is where the cars go, this is a bus lane, and but there's not enough space to do that, you know. But
now they're mad that the bikes are on the sidewalk.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it's like you have
but I'm like, well, you know, you didn't want a bike path, so
yeah I mean, because that's what, you know, I mean, I've gone for a bunch of rides with Toby when Dylan was in Montreal, so, you know, and Toby's brother, but a lot of times if I'm going somewhere on my own, and if I want to go somewhere in a good amount of time, I'll just take Sherbrooke Street.
Yeah, me too.
I won't even take de Maisonneuve because, I mean, the road, it's not great. I mean, just before going back to school, I worked for the city of Côte-Saint-Luc, you know. I was a blue collar, so I did that. I was a gardener. But for me, it's like if the roads aren't maintained well, I'll take a better maintained road than a so-called safer kind of space, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say I'm taking a chance by taking Sherbrooke, because, you know, it's not unsafe, but, you know, I understand that people want a designated bike lane. They want a protected lane because they feel safe there.
Right.
But it's kind of like, okay, if you're going to offer that, you kind of have to make sure it's well maintained, or make sure that people actually want to use it. Because if you offer it in a not so great quality, well, then you're not going to see the results you want.
Yeah.
I guess it's the same. You can maybe talk about, you know, the whole Grand Boulevard, making that the bike lane. You have that same, you're going to eliminate one side of parking.
I know.
It's the same
Well,
story, you know?
Can I just jump in quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think all of us agree that the bike paths are good, but to me it's just kind of like, it's not enough, you know, like just one road gets a bike path. And I know Malcolm wanted to say something, so Malcolm, I don't know, do you have something to say? Maybe.
Well, yeah, kind of. I mean, and first of all,
Hi,
hi,
Malcolm.
hey Sue, hi
Aren't
James
you
and
in
Dylan,
Ottawa
and
now?
I'm in Gatineau, yeah,
Yeah.
the Outaouais.
Yeah.
So I'm taking a break from Montreal, but I mean,
Okay.
I'm working in with the labor union in
That's
in
right.
the public service. So I'm doing advocacy work every day now. So
Great.
it's not on sustainability issues, but you know, it's still advocacy. So it's interesting to see how this Terrebonne bike path thing has played out. I like Twitter a lot, so sometimes I go and see what's happening on about, you know, about Montreal politics there. But anyway, here in Gatineau, there are a lot of bike paths. There are a lot of recreational cyclists. It's a really cool place. Like I go for a bike ride after work, and there are paths everywhere. Where people are just used to it. But the thing is here that they're mostly recreational paths. You can still get to like an important point B, but they're often like along the river, or like somewhere where the bike paths do not impact the parking. Anyway, what I wanted to say before, I don't want to like get too far away from our train of thought, but it seems to me as if in municipal politics, it's hard for people running a campaign to have like a very detailed platform, because when you want to present issues to voters to get buy-in, you have to present them in a sort of summary fashion. And you know, I think if in theory, it would be great if you could, you know, present tons of issues to voters and then get tons of buy-in and then implement tons of bike paths. But it's hard to, I think there's a communication challenge there. And that's like why the lobbies are important, the community groups that are there to speak in favor of these issues and build that support. But I think, you know, ultimately, I just wanted to say that, to highlight how the community activism and then the political activism really go hand in hand, because without one, then the politicians can't really move forward, unfortunately, without some, you know,
support.
As if it seems as if there's a community support behind them.
No, that's absolutely true. And that's why I'm saying, like, Toby, if you know, things like this, or if there's a group or whatever, it's good to get to know your, you know, your political representatives and bring forth ideas of things that you want to see.
And in terms of actually engaging too with that process, I mentioned this to Malcolm too before. It seems very, at least to most people, there's not a lot of knowledge about how the system actually works, how to be engaged with it, how to have it transparent. You know, you get given certain biased viewpoints by the media that, at least in our case in NDG, is very kind of conservative, at least the English media. So it doesn't really fully represent both sides, but also how to become engaged with the political process. So maybe we could talk about that a bit too. But if someone had another comment first, but like just how we can build communities and political, build transparency with the political system, and how to get people to engage too. Because I think there is a strong, most people have a strong opinion or perspective on what they'd ideally like to see happen. Like I think a lot of people, at least in my generation, are for any sort of action that promotes the environment and sustainability, but they're not necessarily engaged with the political process if that's the right channel to go about to have these changes. So I think there's a bit of a disconnect there too. Maybe we could talk about how to firstly engage and how to make that more transparent too.
Sure. Did you say someone else had a comment there?
Well, if we, this is a whole new topic, but like if someone wanted to give a comment first on something else. I know Dylan was talking about something too, but.
No. Oh, Doug, you got something to say? No, never mind.
But yeah,
Well, could I just, because I was just going to mention what's the engagement level in the council meetings, would you say?
Yeah. Well, before COVID, BC and, AC, before COVID, we had quite a number of people showing up. We had a lot of regulars, the people that aren't, I would say, like, there's a few regulars who have like mental health issues that that's sort of like their night out. They will come to council and ask the same things over and over. But it was pretty good. Online is not as popular. We might have like 50 people or something, like, considering that it's online, you'd think there would be more. But the problem is it's not interactive.
No.
It's just, I don't know what we're using, but it's not an interactive, like, people send in their questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then we answer the questions. So I don't like it as much because there's not this back and forth. But I agree with, and in terms of voting, I think the level of turnout was 37% or something. It's the lowest.
It's pretty low
of all levels. Yeah, it's very low. Unfortunately, because this is the level of politics that affects you the most, right? So you think people would be involved. So I've been trying to get more people involved, and I agree with you, Toby, that it's like so confusing. Like, same with me when I started the job, just trying to figure out how things work, because we have the 19 boroughs. Then our borough is surrounded by independent municipalities like Côte St. Luc, Westmount, Montreal West, Hampstead. So they're all their own independent entities. And then, then downtown is responsible for some things, and the borough is responsible for some things. And like, it's insane. Plus we have 103 elected officials, which is way too many, I think, for a city council. It's just too many. We have 65 city councillors, and the rest are borough councillors. So I don't know, if I just think it's way too many people. So what I started doing, like, I asked a lot of questions, obviously, the first year that I was in office, and it was because I just was trying to understand why they did things a certain way. It just didn't make sense. It was like complicated, and then I was accused by my borough director of asking a lot of questions. But what I started doing was coffee with the mayor. So every month I would organize a coffee just in a coffee shop, just to, casual get together, or even in a bar, we'd get together and have a beer. And it was just to talk, because I felt like with borough council, it's quite formal, and we're all on a table at the front, and they have to ask a question in public, and not everybody likes to speak in public, or maybe they feel insecure about their English or their French, and they don't want to speak publicly. So this was an opportunity for people to come out and just meet me and ask their questions about how things work or why we do things a certain way. A big discussion was snow removal, how that worked, you know. So I found that quite successful, and unfortunately with COVID I had to stop that. But yeah, I would really, it's shocking how little people, well, it's shocking that how little people know how government works. But on the other hand, it's not that shocking because I feel like it's made complicated on purpose so that people don't get involved. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of been made so complicated that it just turns people off. And especially like our website, like you cannot, like the documents from council are PDFs. So you can't even, they're not even searchable, you know, by word, which to me is like so not transparent. So there's many things like this that I would like to see changed, but you know, it takes time.
Yeah. Does anyone else have comments on that idea too? Of like transparency, engagement. There's also a certain stigma too, or like certain views that, you know, yeah, it's boring. It's I don't know, or even the fact that you said like these regulars showing up that are like people with mental illnesses, like there's kind of this like view on like, you know, oh, you only go to like council if you have nothing to do, or like,
yeah, right,
or if it's like in your, like directly in your front of your house or whatever. But I think you bring up even the idea of like the website and engagement, like it's not really up to where we are now too, in terms of the online mediums that people engage with a lot more readily and a lot more easily too. I mean, there's obviously still accessibility issues, like, you know, for some people, but yeah, I think that's, at least from our generations, or like, you know, even younger generations, like they're not engaging with it because they're not engaging with those channels or those
like
forums.
the idea of going to a meeting probably is not your idea of a good time on a Monday night, right? So especially a council meeting. But I am very present on social media, on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and but I've sort of taken a break from it because it's been too much, like especially during Terrebonne. It was just like I just felt like I had been in the boxing ring. so I took it off all my devices for now, and I'll go back to it. But you know, I think I'm pretty accessible to people, and but it's amazing how people think that, you know, I'm the mayor and therefore I'm not a human being, so they can say whatever they want to me. And I find that really astounding. The level of incivility is, you know, and I won't engage with people like that. You know, if they send me a really rude email or something, I just don't respond. But I just don't think that's necessary. You know, you'll get a lot better response with me if you're polite. But I understand that, you know, especially I noticed in COVID, people are angry, they're frustrated, they're tired. They just want to yell at somebody. So I sort of get that.
Anyone else have any question? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to jump in. I mean, and that's just like on that, I think that's really sad to hear that people are angry. And I think that's a good assessment too, that like people are, because of COVID, people are a little bit more on edge, but you know, there was a lot of, I think, verbal violence against elected people before too. So that's really disturbing. But on the other point of like city politics and getting people interested, and I think, well, I grew up in a DG, as I think everyone knows, and there have not been a lot of like interesting, engaging projects that have made us proud to live in that borough. Like they redid the stones in Girard Park, and then but like that's one of the biggest things that I remember that's been like achieved. And then you look at other boroughs like the Plateau, and I thought that was super cool when Luc Ferrandez was reconfiguring the streets so that the residential streets should no longer be through traffic streets. You know, it's completely bonkers that people drive 50 kilometers an hour down these narrow residential streets where kids are playing. And like, so to me, that's, you know, if you can bring in, and I know like this is what you tried to do with the Terrebonne bike path, bringing in big, bold ideas that get people happy to live in the city and to have, you know, cool infrastructure where il fait bon vivre, as we say in Quebec. Because like you look at Quebec City, and Quebec City is a driving city. You know, there are highways everywhere. It's never going to be the as bike friendly as Montreal can be because of Montreal's density and the fact that, well, we have a few highways in Montreal, but they're all jam packed. So like you can't get from one end of the city to another in a car very quickly. So yeah, I think that's the key. Big, exciting projects. Like one thing that I have told people in secret is, well, why don't we turn like de Maisonneuve Boulevard into a park? Why do we even need that as a street? Like, you know, people can drive on Sherbrooke, people can drive on other streets. Why do we have so many streets
I know
that are covered in asphalt? You know, and in other parts of the city. Well, it doesn't happen very often, but you know, sometimes streets can be closed, like they did in
like Mount Royal,
to create more park space and more space for cyclists and pedestrians. So I think there's so much that can be done in cities everywhere.
I totally agree. Like de Maisonneuve, I would love to turn it into like near Vendôme Metro, just make it pedestrian, bus, and bike path, like close it to cars. Because it's insane right now. There's just too much happening. And I would love to close down Monkland during the summer and just have restaurants on the street and, you know, places for people to walk. And, but, you know, we just put a few bollards onto the street this summer on Monkland in front of some stores, and people went ballistic because they had to walk a block to, you know, with their groceries or whatever. It's just like, really? I mean, and as a politician, you just have to have the courage to say, you know, for every complainer, there's like 10 who actually like it, right? You're going to complain if you don't like it. But if you like it, you're not going to say anything generally. So you just have to have the courage to say no, like, because I don't think people can even picture it. You know, like they need to be able to picture it and to live it and to get used to it and then say, wow, you know, it's quite quiet. Like people on Terrebonne, the ones who liked it, they said it was so much quieter without the cars parking, you know. So, but unfortunately, my colleagues let me down and voted against it. So. And I think that they'll probably pay for that next year because they lost all these people who voted for them because they were going to put in bike paths, you know.
Well, I was going to that's interesting that you say about certain things, because I remember one of my family friends, part of the Girl Guides, I think they're helping out with the Falaise, with that group that does that kind of work. And I had never heard about it before. And so I just went over just a day just to help them clean up that area.
Yeah, the Corvée, yeah.
Yeah, and Christian showed up, you know. But yeah, I'd never heard about it. It was, oh, this is a cool project, you know, get a nice park down there, use the space that's available. But that whole idea that there are certain things that could be kind of like these big projects for a borough, but they don't necessarily happen because I guess politics gets in the way. Or I was going to just comment or get your opinion on the idea that you were saying with the politicians' bold ideas, but, you know, in class when we talk about it, some people say, okay, planners are just supposed to act as experts. You recommend, and it's the politician council that gets to decide.
Right.
But then when you have that turnover, projects don't get to happen because the new mayor comes in. No, they're scrapping this. So all that work that went into that doesn't actually happen. And so, when these projects, you can't just snap your fingers and say, okay, we're doing this. There's like a process, bureaucracy gets involved. And then because of that political turnover, projects just don't get done, and it's just status quo.
Yeah.
And I guess COVID is kind of a good opportunity to say, hey, let's try this. But you get that pushback again, and okay, you're just back to square one.
Yeah.
And it's like the idea with the new plan for Saint Denis. They want to really put that bike lane, reduce parking, but the media steps in, all these people, no. But then when you get people's opinion who actually live there, they're like, no, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the thing. Like, I can provide all kinds of studies that show that biking, actually having a bike path, either helps a business maintain their business or it improves it. And so all these people say, nobody's going to shop, you're getting rid of parking. And I say, well, show me the studies. Like, I'm open to learning. Like, show me the studies that say if you put in a bike path, you're ruining the business. And they're not able to do it. They're just like, how is this going to affect me? I cannot park in front of my Provigo, so it's all about me instead of the common good, like unjamming the traffic and making the air cleaner and making the borough greener and more family friendly or child friendly or people friendly, just built for people. But I think we're headed there. Like, the Falaise is going to happen, the Doll Park,
over the Turcotte,
over joining up the bike path, that's going to happen. And we're developing the Hippodrome, the old Blue Bonnet site, and so there's an opportunity to develop an entire neighborhood with no cars. Like, we could just have a ring road around it, and housing and daycares and schools, everything that you need there within walking distance. There's a town in Holland that's designed like that I would like to sort of model this on, and make it bike friendly and pedestrian friendly and so on. And if you build more housing near the metro, then then they don't need cars, they can take the metro. But we also have a hard thing with public transit, whereas in Europe, everybody uses it. Here, it's like, it's for the poor people, or it's dirty, or it's not safe. Like, so many of my kids' friends, none of them took public transit growing up because their parents thought it was dangerous, which is like, it couldn't be further from the truth. It's more dangerous driving your kid to school. So it's like getting people into the metro and onto the buses.
Yeah, because that's interesting, because last week for class, we had to go to Halifax, the public meeting, when they had their council meeting.
Oh, did you? Oh.
And so that was the same process like you were saying. It's online, and if you want to speak, you have to register beforehand, and you'd be allotted 5 minutes.
Oh, so you could actually ask your question.
Yeah.
Oh,
so somebody, but all it was just amendments to bylaws. So there's a lot here. Person wants to rezone it from commercial to residential. They want to put a unit, and one registered speaker. He was a former counselor, so hey, I guess he wanted
that was it?
Old haunting ground. Yeah. That's
okay.
It. He spoke.
We have an hour and a half of questions.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot, and I often extend the time so that everybody can ask their question. The other thing I did was I alternate men and women, because I found that the men were taking a lot of space and time, and I wanted to encourage more women to get involved.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because I guess the online, like you said, you would think that, oh, it's online, it's convenient. People could just sit at home
Yeah.
and they could go and get engaged. But, this was, you have to go on Microsoft Teams, you have to sit there, you have to go on. And yeah, it was just one person, registered speaker. There were 3 cases, 3 amendments
that's
that were
fun.
proposed. But the way,
No, ours, there's a lot of fireworks and it goes on for 5 hours. Believe me. It's
wow,
like,
yeah.
it's once a month that it's exhausting.
But yeah, you get this sense that when it came to these amendments, the councillor whose district this lot was and where the rezone, she was like, no, a lot of residents were against it. And all the way HRM, it's all these towns put together, and it's a
Right.
huge municipality. It would take like 3-4 hours to drive across the whole municipality. So
Really?
you have, I think there might be 12 councillors or something. Anyway, but it's kind of this weird idea that where the issues are where the issues are, the councillors could be outvoted by somebody from outside of the community that isn't
Oh,
affected by
really?
what's going on. So
Wow.
if this commercial building wants to be rezoned and put a multi-dwelling, these councillors that live across the river can say, oh, you know what? Yeah, I vote for it,
Really?
So it was interesting to see the different politics that go on. And you have one councillor who's like, oh, I've actually never agreed with this councillor so much, and back and forth, but it was, I did my undergrad in political science. So like, oh, that's kind of interesting for me, but if you're just a resident and maybe you have I guess if you want to call them a single issue voter, where if they're super against one type of thing, if they're really against bikes, they'll show up to all the meetings that talk about bike paths. And then,
well, a lot of the questions don't have anything to do with what's on the agenda either. People just ask their questions, and these days there's quite a few fireworks among the councillors because they're all against me. So it's yeah, I have to be very patient. But anyway.
Yeah, we're talking about kind of I think we're all, again, in agreement about a lot of these issues and frustrated a lot of times that whether you're someone actually in office or whether you're just a citizen and you want to see these things happen, and then you see something like just the Terrebonne bike path or whatever, and it's kind of like, why is this happening? Like, why does you've mentioned it before too, like the small minority, outweigh the majority that's silent? And I think it kind of, for me at least, goes back to the idea of like engagement and kind of like openness. And people aren't, it's only the small minority that are very against something that speak out, and then their voice gets to win out somehow. And when in a lot of cases we would probably see the majority disagree with them. So like, I feel like that's a big disconnect, having the small minority being able to make these decisions to go against the majority, and also the way that kind of these issues are framed by different media outlets. Or it's a big thing also in the States too, right? Like the idea that the media kind of like controls the game in terms of politics. So I think that's also another big issue to like kind of getting forward with change. Like, you have a few naysayers that can just kind of like disrupt everything. So I'm wondering just how we can get over that disconnect and maybe get, I don't know whether it's just a question of like, if you just believe in something, you have to really speak out for it, even if it's agreeing with something. So I don't know what stuff can be done in terms of that, but that was just kind of an idea.
Well, like I said, I think you need to have counselors that, like Projet Montreal, they ran on a campaign, and I campaigned with them, of more active transit, more active transport. Like, that was one of their platform. It was in their platform, and they all voted for this bike path in June. And then, the first day it was installed, of course, people were opposed, but a small minority. But immediately, Peter McQueen called me and said, we have to take it down. And I'm like, why? Like, it'll be fine. Just ride it out. You just have to have thick skin and just tell people it's temporary. It'll come down in the winter. It's not the end of the world. Like, relax. But they couldn't take the heat, so they voted it away. So, like I said, I think politicians need to be held accountable for what they do. And if they don't stand up for what they believe in, then they really shouldn't be in the job.
Yeah, does anyone else have any ideas or comments on that? I don't know, either engagement or, having this small minority being able to dictate kind of what gets done.
Well, I'm curious to see if the Cavendish Extension will be done ever.
Yeah, we're working on that. The problem is the railway, the
CP.
Yeah, they're really bad to deal with. So I've had many, many meetings with Côte St. Luc and Hampstead and, all these, and TMR, like everybody wants it.
Yeah, Brownstein's pushing
Oh
for
yeah,
it
and we've talked to Alan Caldwell, the guy in charge of mobility on the executive, and again, it's like one step forward, two steps back. I don't know.
But isn't CP, it's all about who's going to fund this, who's going to pay for it? Is that what the sticking point is?
No,
or?
they want, I think they want, they're asking that a tunnel be built.
Oh,
and we don't want to build a tunnel.
You want an overpass?
Overpass.
Yeah.
Or somehow get around it. I don't know. Like,
right.
Or just make it disappear altogether.
Well, then you have the town, that stupid Royal Mount project going on too.
Yeah, well, I'm curious to see what happens with that because of COVID, I don't see it being, I didn't see it being a viable undertaking before, but even now, man, it would be great if they just went bankrupt or something. No, it's terrible.
Oh, yeah, who's going to want to go shopping?
From the 1980s.
Yeah.
We don't need as many hotels right now, also.
No. And there's what else? I think they were having a big water park in there, and as if we're going to have a water park. Anyway, yeah, I went to the public hearings on that and made a presentation just that this is not the way we should be going at all. This whole consumerism. And this is one of the things I'm hoping that will come out of COVID is, I don't know about you guys, but I wear the same thing every single day pretty much. I switched my winter clothes to my summer clothes, but I haven't hardly worn anything because I'm not going anywhere. I'm not doing events. I'm not, I don't have to dress like a mayor. I just have to go online. And so it makes you realize how little you actually really need, to live your life, and spend a lot less money, and we're not traveling, and I don't know, in a way there's a positive. It's a bit, I'm worried about your generation, a future, and you want to get on with your lives, and my kids are the same age or a little bit younger, but they're 24 and 21, and it's a drag to be stuck at home. But I kind of like the idea that everybody's slowing down a little bit and working from home. Maybe that's going to change our habits. And, I like to think that this will be a good thing for the environment, that it'll be something will stick from it. But mostly humans are stupid, so probably not.
Right. Well,
Wait, can I interject?
Yeah, go, Dylan. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question. I've been trying to think of a good question. What do you think Montreal is going to be like in 50 years, 100 years? Do you think we'll still be here? If so,
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, I don't think we're going to have cars.
One thing, I don't know if you know anything about the sea levels, because we're an island, but it seems like no one has ever spoken to me about rising sea levels being an issue for Montreal. So I just don't know, is it some kind of physics thing? I don't know.
I don't know enough about it to.
And like heat waves, they seem to be getting worse, or maybe
terrible.
I'm just
This summer was brutal, and of course out west you're on fire, and all the smoke. We saw the smoke here, like we had the haze, and that's how far it traveled. So but you try to tell people this, and it's just like it's almost as if they're not inconvenienced enough to take it seriously.
It needs to come from a higher level. It needs to be like the federal government of Canada. It's like, no more, this industry is just done.
No more fossil fuels. Yeah.
I think it's going to be hard for, look, smoke in the air. We need this bike path, therefore. So
yeah,
it's for just a regular person. But
well, and I think also, like, even just the price of gas, like if you go to Europe, it costs a fortune, so people don't drive that much. So even if we were to put the price of gas up, that would be something. Remember when gas, the first time it went over $1 and everybody freaked out and started buying smaller cars, and I forget which decade that was, but there was a big shift in driving, and then everybody got used to paying that much money, and then they just went back to buying really big cars again. So, but like, for instance, one of the bylaws that we passed in our borough, there's a couple of things we've done to sort of dissuade people from owning cars, and we've put up the price of parking on the street, and you pay more according to the size of your engine, because that's on your registration of your car. So it's an easy thing to look at and charge. And if you have an electric car, you actually pay the least amount. And then in new developments, we used to have a minimum number of parking spots that the developer had to include in the development, in the housing development. And now we're getting rid of that. So you don't have to put parking in. Like, we don't want them to put parking in, because you want to dissuade people from owning a car. But what I would like them to put in is like bike racks and like communal tow. Like, for example, if you buy a condo, you buy a membership with communal tow, and there's like say 5 or 6 or whatever cars there for the tenants of the condo complex, because most people's car just sits idle for hours or days at a time. So you don't need to own a car, or not everybody does.
Can I just ask one more thing? What are your thoughts on rising housing costs? Is this an issue in Montreal, or?
It's a big issue. It's a very big issue, and I'm very concerned about it, because your generation really has no hope in getting into the housing market or buying a house. But and maybe you're not interested in that either. Like, maybe that's a shift happening also. But one of the policies we have is new developments have to have 20% social housing, 20% affordable, and within that 40%, 20% of the units have to be big enough for a family, because we'd like to keep families in the city.
This is like NDG only, or?
No, this is citywide. Citywide.
So what about these condos on the canal? Like,
yeah.
Griffintown?
Do those count? Do those have to have 20% affordable?
Well, no, because they were built. Sorry, my battery's going. They were built before this policy was adopted, but maybe some of the newer ones would be covered under that. And the developer, if they don't do that, I think they have to. But there was before this, the policy was they put money into the social housing fund. The problem is the boroughs don't build the social housing. Like, it's like an organization or a different body that actually builds it. So I think they're just not good at getting the social housing going. But but housing prices have gone through the roof because, Toronto's not affordable, Vancouver's not affordable. So now Montreal's the next frontier, I guess. But another thing
I think the government needs to step in.
Well, the foreign buyers tax kind of worked in Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah. Well, another thing we've done is crack down on Airbnb, because that really took out a lot of housing from the rental market.
Mm-hmm.
So you're only allowed to have Airbnb in certain areas, and only for like 180 days a year. Like, so you can rent, and it has to be your primary residence. So.
Is that in all the boroughs of Montreal?
That's a good question, Malcolm. I don't know. I know we're adopting it, but I think a lot of boroughs, like the Plateau, were looking at it because it was like out of control there. Yeah.
Because I think for myself and other people around my age, like, what are we gonna do? Like, I feel that I don't want to be stuck, with landlords that can always jack up the prices and charge pretty high prices because they know that we don't have a lot of options right now.
Right.
I
know a lot, and a lot was going into Airbnb. So, and the other thing that we've done in our borough is we've really cracked down on slumlords because they were taking advantage of a lot of newcomers who were afraid or didn't know how to complain. So we increased the fines exponentially, and we just kept on, we hired extra inspectors, and we followed up and followed up and followed up, but it's such a complicated problem, because you have to be aware of the issue. And if people don't complain, you're not aware of it. And then these slumlords, they're really they're not nice people. So.
Are there any zoning related topics, kind of issues that go into that? Because I'm familiar with the Halifax situation right now, but there it's a very low vacancy rate also. And they just put in a measure for backyard houses, or, where people can build a little kind of nanny house or whatever in their backyard to kind of rent out, to kind of maybe put less pressure on the housing situation. But just for the example we looked at with the zoning thing, it was just a dépanneur on the corner really not doing well. The owner wanted to put in a new multi-dwelling unit, 4 to 6 unit, and it's a primarily single family housing neighborhood, But again, the counselor there was against it. It doesn't fit in with the character of the neighborhood. So is there anything the borough can do to say, hey, if you're gonna, maybe start building more triplexes, or instead of
one of the things, one of the big problems, sorry, I just had to plug in my phone. One of the big problems we have here are renovictions, where, the landlord kicks everybody out to do renovations, and then, he ends up subdividing the apartments into even smaller units and then charging a lot more. And, by then the tenants, they can't come back in. So we're just in the midst of adopting a bylaw about that will stop those kinds of renovictions. That you can't subdivide apartments into 1.5 units or something. But in terms of building more, I mean, there's no shortage of things being built here, it seems. It's just, what's affordable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really know what the answer is to that.
It's a bigger, I guess it's systemic. There's a lot of factors.
Yeah.
All the things we're talking about.
Yeah, it's what the market can bear, right?
Yeah. Because you said, the borough doesn't build anything. So
sorry to cut you guys off, but we're just kind of getting to the end of our kind of meeting, so I wanted to try to think up kind of action solution oriented. That's kind of the whole idea behind this. And we talked a lot about at least in this meeting, kind of like going or wanting change and going through political channels, and even seeing in a lot of cases things not happening there too. So if we can just end about thinking about how to get change to happen, in political channels, whether it's local or federal or provincial, and also what other channels can we use, and how can we go about change in other ways. Obviously, the political channel, I think some of us here would argue that's kind of one of the good ways to go about it, but there are obviously other ways too. So maybe just thinking about those two things, like what other channels can we use to bring about change, and how can we engage with political channels, whether it's local or otherwise, to get change to happen. So if anyone has any ideas on that, feel free to share those.
Well, I mean, you're not going to like this answer. But for me, the thing I'm worried about is, like, humans won't be here in, 200 years because, it's too hot. And so I'm really at a loss for, like, what I could possibly do to, like, even if I had all the power in the world and I could just, get rid of all the cars on Terrebonne forever.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really going to help? I feel like we need it needs to be like the federal government, but maybe that's not even enough. It needs to be like the, some global thing, the UN, but no one's going to listen to them. So I don't know. My answer is just I have despair, and that's honest. So, okay.
I despair too. I feel the despair as well, but I think all activists felt despair throughout history. I'm sure the women that were fighting for the vote felt despair. People in the civil rights movement felt despair, and people were killed. And it's all throughout history. You can look at things like that, and I think the worst thing you could do is give up. And I know it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, but I think the one thing you can do is not own a car. Like, that is the one, as an individual, that's one thing you can do. So you just have to do what you can do as an individual, and then try to influence other individuals to do the same, and hope that it changes.
Yeah, hopefully there'll be some cataclysm, and then it'll be like COVID, but climate related, and then the government will be like, okay, no more cars at all or something. But because it doesn't seem like we're worried about the end of the world, and we can't even get a bike path. Like,
I know,
because people are like, no, I'm not going to talk.
No, but I think we just need we need government, like we need politicians who will say no. Like, no, we're going to put this bike path in. I don't give a shit. Like, this is for the greater good, and it's not about you parking your car. It's about the greater good and our planet. And then they say, well, I drove around for an hour looking for a spot, so that was bad for the planet. Just like, okay, whatever, right? Like,
but I have good faith for that COVID, the pandemic, can change things. I think people are realizing, how much money they're spending on their parking passes at work when they're working from home. People are realizing how much of a burden it actually is to own a car. And I'm hopeful that, in the future, if working from home can become it's going to become a societal shift that we're going to move towards. For myself, at least, I don't have any transportation problems right now. I can't imagine needing a car anytime soon, because my main trips are to go to the grocery store, go to all my local trips, which I'm able to do on my bike. And if I want to go to Montreal, I'll just take the train or rent a car. Like, there are solutions if you don't own a car.
Yeah. And I feel as mayor too that, I can be an example. Like, people say, oh, where do you, I suppose you have a parking spot. And I'm like, no, I don't even have a car. Like, yes, I have a parking spot at the office, but I've put in racks to hold 14 bikes. So more people are actually biking to the office than before. Well, not now, but before they were, because they saw that I was riding to work. So they would ride to work, and they would had a place to park their car inside the garage. So I feel that, you know, I think I can, I bike the bike or walk the walk, talk, you know, and I think that's important. But I think you're right, Malcolm. And I think that, you know, we were all able to change our behavior overnight because of COVID. Like, we had to stay home. We couldn't go shopping. We had to learn to bake bread or whatever, stock up on toilet paper, everything that everybody was doing. And we were able to do it. So why can't we do it for the planet if we can do it for our health? You know?
Yeah,
Well, that's
so
what.
closing,
Oh,
I
sorry,
just want to try to get some actual brainstorming happening, or just people saying whatever they think. Like, how can we actually get this change to happen? What sort of concrete things we can do, whether it's engaging politically or otherwise? Or does anyone just have any ideas? It could just be, you don't know if it works, but maybe it's something you thought about. I don't know.
Well, become a member of a community group or a political party.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's a good one. Anyone else with any ideas what you could do or what we could do?
You could write a letter to your federal MP. Doesn't even cost a stamp. You just write their name and address on it.
You can also write an op-ed in the Gazette for like 700 words, 750 words, whatever. Because their readership, I can vouch for this because I worked there, is the average age is probably around 70. So, you know, we have to convince those people that they've done a lot of damage to the planet. Now it's time to fix it. So yeah, writing letters, I think. I know you think that people don't read them, but they do.
Anyone else have any ideas, whether it's even non-political too, how to get engaged or things you thought that could make a difference? We have some people that didn't speak, so feel free to just, it's never too late, but
Might be shy.
yeah, if you had any ideas, even if it's sounds crazy, we're open to hearing them. I know a lot of us also, you know, take action by going out and demonstrating, and
Mm-hmm.
still whether or not that can make a difference, we're hopeful, but it's kind of like strength in numbers, I guess, in that case. There was even a protest this past weekend that marked the 1 year since
Mm-hmm.
Greta was here. So even something like that, we had people coming out. But yeah, anyone feel free to just say anything. We're just going to wrap up otherwise. So last chance to get in any sort of words, something on your mind.
Sue, do you see yourself becoming more engaged after being the mayor, or once you're kind of done your mandate, your administration, do you think you're going to become less engaged or more engaged? What do you think for yourself?
I don't think I'll ever be less engaged. I've always been very engaged, and I'm, speak my mind. It's funny you ask because, I'm an independent now, so I'm starting my own party in Côte-de-Neige, NDG. And I want to run councillors in every district of Côte-de-Neige, NDG. So there's 5 districts. And I'm approaching people now because I really want people who are in the job because they care about the community and they want to change the community, not because they need a job or they like the power or whatever. I think that's crucial if you're going to bring change to the community. You have to not care about your political career. You just have to forge ahead. And there are people who will follow you, you know, like they will get behind you. And but I think there's a real appetite for that. I think people are sick and tired of wishy-washy politicians. I know I am. And it's like, stop speaking gobbledygook and do something. Yeah, so, you know, despite the hell I've been through these last few years, or I'd say the last year, it's been very difficult being the lone voice and having everybody beat me up. But it's made me even more convinced that, you know, we need politicians that are actually going to make a difference.
Anyone else with some final thoughts or words before we wrap up? All right, well, yeah, it was great to have you on, Sue, and hear your perspective. I think we all kind of agree on a lot of these fundamental issues, so we're really almost in the same boat in terms of trying to get things we want to see happen to actual fruition. And interesting to hear you, even as someone in a position of power and authority, not being able to do those, even small things in the Terrebonne bike path case. So
okay, but I did do some things.
right. No,
I have changed some things, but yeah, I mean, but I'm not giving up. Like, I just think that it still can be done. And so I wanted to thank you for inviting me on here tonight. I hope it didn't take up too much of your time. And also, like, as a urban planner, you know, maybe you have some ideas for me. Like, you know, we have urban planners at the city, and there are some good bureaucrats, but there are people who've been there for a long time too that are pretty jaded. And you know, we could use some fresh ideas, I think. So if there's anything that you can suggest, you know, and I'm always, like I said, I'm always available to chat.
all right. Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm not short of any ideas, but
Good. Well, bring them on.
all right. Well, thanks everyone who showed up. Even we see you even if you didn't speak. So thank you for being here, and I hope to see you guys at the next one of these in 2 weeks' time. And let me know if you end up doing a concrete action or find some sort of solution that you think of. I'm definitely going to open up to this idea of writing letters and really voicing myself as a citizen and engaging in that process more. So hopefully other people either follow that or do another channel to go about change. So thank you guys again for showing up tonight.
Thanks. Good night. Go and watch the debate now and be really depressed.
Gonna get the popcorn ready.
Yeah. Okay, bye.
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 Bye.